Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Deep Dive into the Archive. Today we will be diving into the album The Glow Part 2 by The Microphones.
The Microphones is, for the most part, Phil Elverum, and he has surrounding musicians as well, but all the lyrics and vocals are from Phil himself. It's also a very personal album. You can tell that with the lyrical content. Pretty much this entire album deals with a breakup that Phil has gone through. A lot of the album is him expressing how he's feeling about the breakup. There's a lot of metaphors used to describe his feelings and the breakup itself. Sort of goes from there, really. There's a bit of story progression, but I don't want to spoil the end.
I wouldn't really consider it story progression.
Well, he goes from being sad to sort of accepting it and then being angry. And then the album ends because he's dying.
I don't know if that...
It's up for interpretation.
Okay, that's not how I interpret it. That's not how I interpret it at all.
No.
Not even close. If we just want to talk about the last track, I view it as him. He says, "Oh, it's cold, my blood barely flows. Oh, I'm alone, except for the sound of insects flying. Around, they know my red blood is warm still," which is to me he has gone through this experience and he's ready to start living, essentially. Blood, it's still warm. He's still got life. And even though he's not in the best mental state, he's still gonna try.
Because I interpret it as he's gone through this and he started doing better, and then it just kind of all falls apart again with Samurai Sword. And because of that, he's left with My Warm Blood, and he's left with sort of feeling hopeless again. He's kind of right back where he started. That's how I interpret it.
Okay, interesting. Because I know on Samurai Sword, he's he be angry.
Yeah.
But to me, it feels like he's getting out of this depression, and this is him just letting out all of his anger and stuff at the very end. He's finally letting go of all of it.
Interesting. Because I really feel like I felt my size and I felt my shape. Or I felt your shape, rather. I feel like that's him letting go of it. And then he kind of halts that progress with Samurai Sword.
I can kind of see that, I guess.
I see where you're coming from too, though.
To me, I felt your shape is kind of like him. He still doesn't want to let go. It's he's still trying to grab on to what was there. And Samurai Sword is him finally just getting everything out. Anger that the relationship didn't go well.
It really didn't go well.
Yeah. I felt my size is very much about he feels small. That song feels very existential to me. And just how it's kind of this realization, he's nothing.
The way I see it is that I felt my size is he realized for the most of the album up to that point, he's been kind of wallowing in his feelings. I mean, I'm so sad, I don't want to go on. And he's being very dramatic. I felt my size is him realizing that, hey, this is a small event in the bigger picture. It doesn't have to have such a large effect on me. I can move on. I can do other things. And then I felt your shape is kind of a continuation with that, whereas I felt my size, he's realizing himself that his personal feelings are small. I felt your shape is realizing that his ex, she's also small in kind of the grand scheme of things. But he does miss her hugs.
But yeah, this record's, it's depresso. Big depresso. It's kind of hard to describe this record. I feel on my first listen through, I thought it was a really good, indie record. Something about it just had, it kept pulling me back to it. I think that is really, thanks to the production on this record. It is, absolutely gorgeous. You have these super rough, beautiful sounding guitars. You have horns that are piercing and rich sounding, and they're absolutely gorgeous. And you have piano and there's woodwind instruments at one point, I'm pretty sure.
There's definitely flute. I know that.
Yeah, there's just such a range of instruments, and it's blended into this gorgeous soundscape almost. This record's kind of noisy, I'd say.
I'd say this record's very noisy. It depends from track to track. There are some tracks, Headless Horseman is just acoustic guitar. But then there are other tracks, the track literally before that, The Moon, there's a ton of just noise and distortion on it.
I think that really contributes a lot to the record. In a lot of ways, it feels kind of overwhelming, which I think it's kind of the purpose of it. What's happening to Phil mentally is very overwhelming for him.
In my personal opinion, the best tracks on the album are the tracks that get noisy, that bring in a lot of different instruments. A lot of the instrumentation is just, it's very pretty instrumentation.
Yeah.
You have all these different things just going on, and it's very much representative of that kind of mental state of being like distraught and how there's all these different things going on.
I'm gonna say something that maybe sounds pretentious, but this album sounds like mahogany.
Mahogany?
Like, the quality of the sounds in it. A very, like, dark, rich looking wood.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Right. Sure. It's not a comparison I ever would have drawn, but sure.
Especially love how, like, echoey a lot of the instrumentation is. You just have layers upon layers upon layers of stuff. And especially this instrumentation contrasted with Phil's very, like, depressed sounding vocals. It's depressing.
Yeah. Phil, his vocals really have a way of, like, cutting through the noise and instrumentation on these tracks. It works out really, really well. This is not, like, the most lyrically dense album. Most of the tracks don't have... Some of them are just instrumentals. Some only have, like, a verse or two. The more lengthy tracks have more substantial lyrics. But even then, because there's all just this noise and other things going on, the fact that the lyrics are kind of minimal doesn't take away from the album, definitely. And the lyrics are there are usually quite pleasant, quite poetic.
I wouldn't describe them as pleasant. They're very depressing.
I don't find this album that depressing, personally. I find it... I mean, sure, he's sad, and I get it. There are definitely times where it's, like, a bit too dramatic for me, though. For example, like Headless Horseman, he's comparing the breakup to him losing a body part.
I mean, like, sort of. I would argue that track is more... That idea is more representative of Phil's, like, mental state. How part of him wants to be back. I mean, I think he says he goes to hell and comes back. And to me, that's very much representative of these two separate parts of him. One of them wants to go back, it wants to stay in this relationship, and the other kind of wants to move on, or maybe the other part is just trying to move on without, like, thinking about it. So, I mean, I can understand how you could see it as being overly dramatic. I don't think it is. It's a metaphor. Yeah, he says, I'll return from my trip to hell as a headless horseman. I mean, you can also look at it as being like he's losing his head or his mind.
Like, I interpret it as his trip to hell is him going through the grief of losing this relationship. When he comes through the grief, he'll still be, he'll be missing a part of him because he doesn't have the relationship. There's other metaphors that I think work out a lot better, personally. I mean, the track literally after that, My Roots Are Strong and Deep. I really like the metaphor on that track where he's feeling stuck and he feels like a tree.
A tree. Cool. I feel like this album has a very melancholic feel to it. I think it just kind of gets in those fifis for me. It gets in those fifis.
It's definitely a very mellow album. One that would be like a well suited to a late night
drive
feel session. Okay. Sure. That's what normal people do, right?
A late night feel session.
Yeah, when you're just like, hey, I'm feeling sad. And then you listen to Deathconsciousness.
Then you listen to A Crow Looked at Me.
Yeah.
And you cry.
Yeah. Anyways, back to the Glow Part 2, which is like sunshine and rainbows comparatively. Speaking of Phil Elverum being a tree, there's a lot of very organic sounding instrumentation on this record, along with like this heavy distortion as well. Like you said, you have those woodwind instruments, but you also have a lot of very acoustic, plucked guitar going. They'll use these instruments and apply them in this kind of distorted, noisy, lo-fi way. A lot of the tracks that have this plucked guitar have it repeating with a delay between your ears, which is a really cool effect. And that depth to these tracks really makes this album a very interesting listen, in my opinion. Like, every time you listen to this album, I feel like you'll be able to, like, pick out something that you didn't quite hear before. It's a great album to go back to time and time again.
Oh, yeah, for sure. One thing that often happens in the album is the fills often kind of, like, drowned out by the instrumentation. You can still hear him, but it's like he's much quieter compared to a lot of the instruments. You know, on other records, I probably wouldn't like it, but I actually really love it on this record. I think it serves a really great purpose of this feeling of being smothered and like isolated, alienated, I guess, from others, and that kind of oppressive feel to those tracks I think works really well.
I'd have to agree. I think, like we said, the overwhelming noise just adds a lot of body to the songs and to the meanings of these songs.
I want to highlight like the first three. The first two tracks of this record are incredible. The opener, I Want Wind to Blow, is just absolutely gorgeous sounding. It feels very like wistful, melancholic. I think Phil consistently throughout this record is incredibly poetic, and it's especially so on this track. And I love the like build towards the end of it with like the harmonica and layered guitars and the thumping drums. This track reminds me of Wind Blowing. Big surprise. It's pretty fantastic. I also really like everything on this album kind of transitions into the next part like perfectly. All the it flows incredibly well. There's so many times I've listened to this record and then I'm like, what the fuck? I'm already on like the last track because everything just like flows so naturally.
I'd have to agree. I love the first three tracks. I think they set a great tone for the rest of the album. The first three tracks are a large portion of the album. This album is an hour and 6 minutes, 20 tracks long. A lot of the tracks are like 2-ish minutes in length. So the first three tracks are like 15 minutes long. So they're a pretty decent portion of the album. Some other tracks I personally want to highlight are Map. I think the instrumentation on Map is just absolutely beautiful. There's so many different instruments. It's very noisy and very momentous track, and I think that really serves to accentuate the meaning of that track and how he has the sort of this map to healing. At least that's how I interpret the track. I also really appreciate the only time there are female vocals on the album is on Map, where they're mirroring Phil's vocals, which I think works really well, adds another layer. Sounds great. We talked about the meaning of these tracks earlier, but I also love the instrumentation on I Felt My Size and I Felt Your Shape. Really, really love those tracks. They're just I find those tracks to be quite beautiful as well. Like a lot of this album sounds absolutely amazing, but there are definitely some highlights here and there.
Yeah, I really love the Gleam part too. You have these like steel drums on this song that I think just perfectly like match this kind of like unstable feeling the track has. It's really fantastic. So like it's just so like wonderful and oppressive. I do also really love Map. I also like You'll Be in the Air. It's very like melancholic feeling. Very like, oh, I feel like my least favorite track is actually maybe I Felt My Size. There's a really like a wacky instrumentation. The track like bursts out of nowhere. This is very weird out there instrumentation, and I think that helps the track. I feel like it helps the track's like point feel, but also I don't know if I enjoy it that much. And that's probably like my only complaint, honestly.
Kind of fair. I don't have much to complain about this album on the whole. There's like a little thing where, like I said, the lyrics maybe get too dramatic here and there. Also, the closer, Warm Blood, is 9.5 minutes. I understand the point of Warm Blood. I don't think it needed to be 9.5 minutes long.
I'm cool with the closer being that long. I think it's actually really cool what happens on that track, because you have like the song portion, then it's like kind of like oppressive ambient instrumental for a lot of the rest of it, and then towards the end you start to hear like the sound of like a beating heart. Works really well for the conclusion.
No, like I understand. I think the separate sections of this track, like I really love the first and the last section, but I feel like that middle is a bit too long. But this is like a small complaint. For the most part, this album is just track after track of, like I said, just amazing songs. Yeah, this album's like a good album. Listen to it, check it out. I'm at like a 9.5 out of 10 on this album. I love it a lot.
I agree. I'm at like a 9.5, maybe a 10. Maybe I felt my size will grow on me more. But yeah, this album's pretty incredible. Go listen to it. Do it. What are you waiting for? I know what you're waiting for. You're waiting to like, comment, and subscribe on this video.
Let's go.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching another episode of Deep Dive into the Archive. If you liked this video, please give it a like, consider subscribing. What are your thoughts on this album? Leave them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this discussion, you can go check out other episodes of Deep Dive into the Archive, or you can also check out our series Album Swap. Thank you for watching our video, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Mwah.
Mwah.
Yes. That was good.
Yeah.
Oh,
This is Car. Bless me.